Okay, I'm going to share with you some information about the history of tattooing. The word tattoo comes from the Polynesian word tatau, which means to mark or strike. And the Latin word for tattoo was stigma, and everybody knows that is something negative. It means a mark or a distinguished mark. It also means slave or criminal. The purposes of tattoos range from religious to groups identification to protection. The earliest tattoo remains date back more than 5,200 years when they found the Iceman of Austria. His name was Otzi, and his tattoos were very random, and it looks as if they were therapeutic. They were placed at random positions on his body where he possibly had received injuries. So from the Greeks and Romans to Japan to modern-day American art, tattoos unite groups of different people. The Egyptians tattooed for religious purposes, and they only tattooed females, and they only tattooed nobility. So noble females and priestesses. They tattooed in a series of dots and dashes over the abdomen, and it was to protect during childbirth. It was, and as the fetus grew, the tattoos give us a sort of net for protection. They also tattooed the deity of Bes on the upper thighs, and Bes is said to be the protector of women and children. So the Greeks and Romans felt that only barbarians tattooed. A lot of people feel that way today. But they borrowed the tradition from the Persians, who tattooed their criminals and they tattooed slaves. The Greeks thought this was a great idea, so they tattooed their slaves and prisoners of war with things like the owner's name across the cheek or their crime that they committed, and they also tattooed across the forehead, "Stop me, I'm a runaway." The Romans began tattooing their gladiators and their legions. They tattooed their legions. Each legion had a specific mark, and most often they tattooed on the hands. They wanted to appear fierce in combat, so they wanted something that was going to be seen. They also developed the first recipe for ink. It was Egyptian pine wood, corroded bronze, gall, and leek juice, and leek juice is a natural antiseptic. The Romans tattooed convicts and slaves right up through the time of Constantine, when he made Christianity the state religion. They felt that since we were created in the image of God, we shouldn't defile the face, but they continued to tattoo on the body. In 787, Pope Hadrian outlawed tattooing altogether. Now we know that the Egyptians only tattooed royalty, but it's just the opposite for the Japanese. Since the merchant class and the lower class were restricted from wearing the ornate kimonos, they rebelled by wearing complete tattoo bodysuits, which cover their torso from their neck only to their elbow and only to their knee. Now, this is what they look like. These tattoos were easily covered with their clothing, so no one really knew. Now, the government outlawed tattoos in 1870 because of international relationships. They felt that tattoos were embarrassing. So tattoos took on a new meaning for the underworld. They thought, great, they'll flourish, because the Yakuza, who are the Japanese gangsters, you might have heard of them, they embraced it and they thought, this is illegal, this is perfect. So from those gangster tattoos, the Japanese artists delivered some of the most exotic, complete, colorful tattoos, and we still follow those traditions today. Now, like many other cultures, tattoos were outlawed in the Western civilizations because of Christianity. However, when sailors encountered the inhabitants of the southern Pacific Islands, they brought the tradition back home. However, they modified it. They started putting on anchors and ropes and ships as a type of amulet for protection. And the coal miners, they picked up the same habits. They would tattoo lanterns on their forearms as a type of protection down in the mines. You may have heard of the artist Sailor Jerry, maybe not, but he made those types of tattoos really famous. He made a lot of money for a lot of people because that was the type that most people got in the early days. So from those first sailor tattoos were born the counterculture and the criminal element. Gangs embraced tattoos, and that was identification. So you might get a gang tattoo with the number, your zip code, or the colors of your gang, and you would be identifiable to another gang member. And since gangs run prisons, they're also really prevalent in the prison system. So tattoos moved from the criminal element to the mainstream, and it was helped along by a show called Miami Ink, LA Ink. Anybody ever seen those? Miami Ink. So they bring the tattoo parlor inside the average citizen's home. They say, okay, that's not a scary place. You can go get a really piece of beautiful artwork. Anybody can. So today, about 1 in 3 adults aged 18 to 23 have at least one tattoo. There are more than 137 million Google searches that are tattoo related that happen every month. 137 million every month. So what was once taboo is now normal. So without a word, tattoos say where I've been, who I am, and where I belong.